Good morning, everyone. We will be beginning in the next 10 minutes. So I'd request all of you to be seated and have some coffee and tea. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Can I have everyone's attention, please? We're just waiting for our panelists to arrive, so we will be beginning in the next 5 to 10 minutes. So I'd request everyone to grab a coffee or tea and be seated. Thank you. That's what it's. I don't see a lot of. That's what Good morning and a very warm welcome to all of you and our esteemed delegates, in-person pleasantries, and all those who are joining us online. My name is Zaid Hassan Khan, and I welcome all of you to this event, which is how can technology help strengthen India's disaster preparedness? A case for effective early warning systems. For the event, we will begin with a short film, followed by a short presentation, succeeded by our eminent speaker who will be providing his inputs to further the discussion. We will also be launching our new study today, which will assess how EWS, early warning systems, contribute to building India's resilience to extreme climate events. Finally, we will end with a moderated panel discussion on how India can strengthen its disaster preparedness. Last month, the country was faced with a severe cyclonic storm, Biparjoy, where the effectiveness of EWS saved millions of lives in Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan. However, as we witnessed with the recent floods in Himachal Pradesh, Haryana, and closely Delhi, the need for effective early warning systems and multi-hazardal early warning systems has become vital to save lives and reduce damages. In recent decades, the frequency and intensity of extreme climate events has increased and has impacted livelihoods and infrastructure, especially in developing countries. The climate risk landscape of India is constantly evolving, which is presenting us with unique challenges. A CEEW study finds that 27 of 35 states and union territories are now vulnerable to extreme hydromet disasters and their compounded impacts, and 80% of India's population actually resides in these vulnerable regions. That brings us to the topic of today, where we intend to unpack the availability, accessibility, and effectiveness of early warning systems and multi-hazardal early warning systems to increase India's preparedness to tackle the impact of extreme events. With this background, let us delve into the proceedings for the day. It is my great pleasure to invite Dr. Vaibhav Chaturvedi, who is a fellow at CEEW, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Zaid. A very good morning to all and a very, very warm welcome. This is a very interesting discussion that is lined up for today. For colleagues who I haven't met yet, I'm Vaibhav Chaturvedi. I lead the long-term emission modeling and the carbon markets work at CEEW. So the situation already, all of you know, the context. I mean, India is already reeling, many states in India are already reeling under floods, severe floods. And this is not really a situation that has happened this year. As we know, year after year now, increasingly, we're experiencing floods, droughts, many different kinds of extreme events. In fact, on the western coast also, earlier we used to experience a lot of cyclone on our eastern belt, but increasingly on our western coast also, we're increasingly facing cyclonic activity and extreme events. So the larger context is kind of very clear to us. It is something that is worrisome, but also science is better trying to understand it. So we are trying to better understand it. And the role of early warning systems is absolutely critical. It is the kind of bridge between science and action on ground. So that's why the role of the topic of today is very, very topical. A bit about CEEW. We are one of Asia's leading research organization. We work across many, many different areas of work, ranging from energy access to industrial sustainability, mobility, air pollution, emissions, many, many different things that we work on. And something of you to learn from many of you across all the areas of work. That's why our stakeholders are absolutely critical for us. They are not just stakeholders, like third-party stakeholders. They are our collaborators, and we really look forward. We are very, very happy that you have taken out your time and come to this discussion today. And during the course of the discussion, you've got an excellent set of panelists and speakers for today. But along with the panelists and speakers, I would also say that the Q&A session and our conversations over tea and then during the breaks is extremely important for all of us to better understand many, many different elements of aspects of this debate on climate and early warning systems. With this, I won't take a lot of time. I really welcome you, all of you, today for this discussion. I look forward to listening to all of you and interacting with all of you during the panel, as well as after the panel. I look forward to continuing our conversation. Welcome again, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dr. Chaturvedi, for highlighting once again India's landscape in terms of disasters and also introducing CEEW. Now, I would like to introduce all of you to a creative initiative taken by the Council to mainstream our research findings and communicate them in a way that reaches a wider audience. Faces of Climate Resilience is a short documentary series that is an extension of our work on mapping India's climate vulnerability. And what it basically does is it captures the voices of people in some of India's most climate vulnerable regions. And the focus is on how individuals and communities are responding to the climate crisis. And when I think of Faces of Climate Resilience, the only one saying that comes to my mind is Himmate Marda Madad Khuda. So God helps the courageous. And therefore, we want to showcase Mandakini Ki Awaz, which is a story of courage and hope. And I'd like the story to be the video to be played. Thank you.
मंदाकिनी की आवाज सामुदायिक रेडियो हम लोग यहाँ पे चला रहे हैं। इसका जो सबसे ज्यादा जरूरत हमको महसूस हुई वो हुई 2013 की आपदा में। कनेक्टिविटी के साधन कुछ थे नहीं, लोग अच्छे से सूचनाओं का आदान प्रदान नहीं कर पा रहे थे। सभी श्रोता भाइबन्द दिदीबहिनी और दानेश्वरहरूलाई मेरो भी नमस्कार। मैं छु पूनम रावत और गाउँ खबर का हालचाल कार्यक्रम की शुरुआत करता देश दुनिया का मुख्य हालचालों से। मेरा नाम पूनम रावत है और मैं मंदाकिनी की आवाज में कम्युनिकेशन टीम हेड काम कर रही हूँ। मंदाकिनी की आवाज एक सामुदायिक रेडियो है, यानी कम्युनिटी के द्वारा चलने वाला रेडियो। यहाँ नजदीकी में मंदाकिनी नदी बहती है, तो उसी के हिसाब से मंदाकिनी की आवाज नाम रखा गया था। मंदाकिनी की आवाज समुदाय से आने वाले हर बिंदुओं पे कार्यक्रम बनाती है। रुद्रप्रयाग जनपद जैसे पहाड़ी एरिया है, आपदाओं की अगर बात करें तो एक तो भूकंप हो गया, फिर भूस्खलन हो गया, ओलावृष्टि, और जो सबसे मेन है वनों की आग। आपदा से पहले, आपदा के टाइम और आपदा के बाद भी से श्रोताओं को जागरूक करती आई है। निष्कर्ष यही आया पूरी टीम का कि हाँ, हमको आपदा पे ज्यादा ध्यान देना है। तो फिर हम लोगों ने श्रोताओं के विचार इकट्ठे करने शुरू किए। किसी ने बोला कि हाँ भूस्खलन पे बना दो, हमारे यहाँ भूस्खलन की बहुत ज्यादा स्थिति है। किसी ने कहा कि आग पे बना दो। तो फिर हमने क्या किया कि सबको लेके 2-2 मिनट की पीएसए जन सूचना हम लोग बोलते हैं पब्लिक सर्विस अनाउंसमेंट, तो वो बनाने शुरू किए। गर्व के साथ कह सकती हूँ कि 3.5 लाख हमारे श्रोता है जो फोन कॉल्स करते हैं।
लेकिन ये आवाज रेडियो जब से हुआ है तब से लोगों को ऐसे दैवीय आपदाएं, मौसम के बारे में बहुत अच्छे अनपढ़ लोग जो नहीं जानते हैं हम उनके रेडियो को लोग सब सुनते हैं। ये विशेष सूचना देती है कितनी वर्षा होने वाली है, हमें क्या करना है। जैसे बरसात में विशेष है, कोई जंगल में जाता है, गाय वैसे जाते हैं, कम से कम वो सजग हो जाए, भाई आज तो बारिश आने वाली है, जरा आज संभल के रहना है हमें। जब हमें ये सूचना मिली तो हम अपना बचाव कर लेंगे कि भाई हमें कहाँ जाना है, क्या करना है और किस प्रकार से अपना बचाव करेंगे।
सरकारी विभागों से भी मंदाकिनी की आवाज की अच्छी खासी लिंक है। मौसम की जानकारी मंदाकिनी की आवाज से जाती है, वो भी पूरे डिटेल में मौसम विज्ञान केंद्र देहरादून से वो जानकारी प्राप्त होती है, उन्हीं की आवाज में जाती है कि जैसे भारी बारिश का हो गया तो वो लोग खुद बताते हैं कि नदियों में पानी बढ़ने वाला है, नदी के किनारे न जाओ। 2014 से अभी तक और आगे भी मंदाकिनी की आवाज सभी श्रोताओं के साथ है और रहेगा कि आपदा के नुकसान को हम कैसे कम करें।
So what we really saw in this specific, and there are 15 others that we have created, and I would request all of you to have a look at all of them. But what it really highlights is the importance of the community coming together in the face of calamity and before calamity even strikes, and preparing for that. And this brings me to invite my colleague, Shreya Vadhavan, who is also a program associate at the council, who will commence with the findings of our new study that further validate the importance of making EWS, early warning systems, accessible, available, and effective for all. So Shreya, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Zed. A very good morning to all the dignitaries and guests present here today. It is our pleasure to host you at the dialogue today. I will be giving a presentation on the state of early warning systems in India on the basis of their availability, accessibility, and effectiveness. So without further ado, let's dive right into the presentation. At the Council on Energy, Environment and Water, we are a multidisciplinary team of over 200 people who are using data, integrated analysis, and strategic outreach to impact sustainable development at scale. Our research programs are aimed to inform deep transformations in the energy and economic landscape in ways how we use, generate, transmit, and distribute energy. We are also committed to developing holistic system-level solutions that can improve the quality of lives for our people by providing clean air, sustainable cooling and mobility, and developing sustainable and efficient food and water systems. To be able to impact sustainable development at scale, we also work on a set of key enablers such as finance, technology, circularity, climate resilience, and enabling enhanced international cooperation. So, why are we all gathered here today to discuss early warning systems? This monsoon, many of you may have received warning messages from the National Disaster Management Authority on your phone alerting you about heavy rainfalls taking place in your area. Some of you might have also noticed alerts on your phone on your way here on the Google Maps. These messages are essentially early warnings being disseminated by the Indian government to alert people about against extreme climatic events and their impacts. So, what are early warning systems? Early warning systems are essential tools for risk management and disaster preparedness that help save lives and minimize the potential impacts of disasters. But how do early warning systems achieve this? Early warning systems achieve this by detecting risks and informing at-risk communities before disasters, thereby enabling early action to save lives and reduce their impacts. Early warning systems do this by using a variety of tools and methods such as sensors, data analysis, and communication channels to gather information to detect potential hazards and provide advance warnings to individuals, organizations, or communities that might be affected. However, now we are moving from early warning systems towards multi-hazard early warning systems. A multi-hazard early warning system essentially has the ability to warn of one or more hazards, which increases the efficiency and consistency of warnings through coordinated, compatible mechanisms and capacities, involving multiple disciplines for updated and accurate hazard identification and monitoring for multiple hazards at one go. This diagram presents a flow of information when alerts are channeled from multi-hazard early warnings towards communities. But why does India need to focus on early warnings or multi-hazard early warning systems? A study by CEEW dwelled upon micro-level hazard assessments to identify district-level climate hotspots and found that over 75% of Indian districts are now extreme event hotspots. That is, they are exposed to floods, cyclones, droughts, and their associated events. We further found that more than 40% of Indian districts are currently witnessing a swapping trend. That is, historically flood-prone areas are now witnessing droughts, drought-prone areas are now witnessing floods, whereas some districts are witnessing floods and droughts simultaneously. We also note that the frequency and intensity of extreme climate events is increasing in the recent decades, as India has faced more than 310 extreme events since 2005. Further, in 2021, we moved a step ahead in this analysis and conducted a district-level vulnerability assessment for all the exposed districts. We found that more than 80% of Indians reside in districts vulnerable to one or more of such extreme hazards. So, why should India invest in early warning systems? A study found that more than 30% of reduction can be achieved in damages if a warning is released just 24 hours before an event occurs. More than 3 to 16 billion worth loss and damage could be saved just by investing USD $800 million in early warning systems. Every $1 invested in disaster risk reduction and preparedness could save up to $15 in post-disaster recovery. And finally, more than 10-fold worth of return on investment is provided by early warning systems that is way higher than any other adaptation measure, according to a report by GCA. Thus, in order to better prepare for disasters and build long-term climate resilience, early warning systems can play a crucial role in three main ways. The first is, of course, saving lives and protecting human assets. Second is protection of nature's resource base and assets such as infrastructures, property, and investments, and ultimately ensure long-term development and economic growth. Therefore, early warning systems are also high on India's national agenda. Under India's G20 presidency this year, a working group on disaster risk reduction has been formed for the first time since 1999. Further, early warning systems remain one of the key priority areas throughout India's G20 presidency. This is also in agreement with Prime Minister's 10-point agenda for disaster risk reduction that says efforts must be made to leverage technology to enhance the efficiency of our disaster risk management efforts. So, what are the different types of early warning systems available nationally and globally? I'd like to walk you through a couple of examples. First of all, we have weather and climate early warning systems that provide advance warnings for extreme weather events such as hurricanes, tornadoes, heat waves, and also long-term risks such as floods and droughts. Then we have earthquake and tsunami early warning systems that use seismometers to detect potential earthquakes and provide warnings to people in affected areas. Then we can have something like public health early warning systems that monitor patterns of disease outbreaks and provide alerts to people and health officials and medical professionals. This could have been crucial for something like COVID pandemic. Finally, we have financial early warning systems that analyze data and market trends to detect potential economic rises or crises. However, from a DRR perspective, there are three broad ways to classify early warning systems. That is, by the level at which it operates, by the type of hazards, and whether it's a single or multi-hazard early warning system. Today, the study that will be launched today and the findings that I'll present today focuses on weather and climate single and multi-hazard early warning systems with a focus on floods and cyclones in India. However, now we have come a long way from early warning and even multi-hazard early warning systems and are transitioning towards end-to-end and people-centered early warning systems that essentially empower individuals and communities to reduce loss and damage in all ways possible. In order to build such effective end-to-end and people-centered early warning systems, we need four key elements. The first is disaster risk knowledge. Second is disaster detection, monitoring, analysis, and forecasting, and its possible consequences. Third is dissemination and communication by an official source of timely, accurate, and actionable warnings. And finally, preparedness at all levels to respond to the warnings received. These four interrelated components need to be coordinated within and across sectors and at multiple levels of the system to work effectively and to include a feedback mechanism for continuous improvement. Failure in one or more component or lack of coordination across these components could lead to a failure of the entire system. Now, how do we reach the masses and communicate these warnings to the communities? It is essential to identify the most suitable method for information dissemination based on the needs and level of the comprehensibility of the community. Dissemination techniques can be further categorized into two broad categories: widespread and targeted dissemination techniques, depending on where they can be used and applied. This slide focuses on widespread methods, that is mass dissemination techniques, which are less targeted and are primarily use mainstream media to reach the masses. The second bracket is the targeted or specialized methods that can provide warnings to individual users, families, persons, neighborhoods, predefined groups, agencies, etc., and can be sent based on location of the end user to make it available to those being affected by the hazard the most. Now, it is well established that early warning systems can improve resilience to climate-related hazards by providing information for early action. However, to be effective, early warning systems must themselves incorporate aspects of resilient systems. CEEW's research proposes a strengthened and sustainable framework on vulnerability to resilience model based on early warning systems, integrating the 4 pillars of the Sendai framework in convergence with the Sustainable Development Goals to enhance the disaster preparedness, reduce the impacts of climate risks, and build resilience at a national and subnational level towards extreme hydromet disasters. For this proposed framework, we have 2 major variables: the vulnerability model and the resilience model. The resilience model has 3 main components, that is availability, accessibility, and effectiveness of early warning and multi-hazard early warning systems. The indicators considered for each of the components in the early warning methodology are presented in this slide. For the vulnerability model, we focus on exposure indexing that is taken from our earlier published report, Mapping India's Vulnerability, a District Level Assessment. And to assess the resilience through early warning systems, we consider a variety of indicators under each component. For availability, we consider the availability and non-availability of early warning systems in the identified hotspot districts. For accessibility, we assess how many people are covered through early warning dissemination systems using teledensity ratio provided by TRAI subscriber database. And for effectiveness, we have two main indicators: the administrative frameworks enabling early warning and early warning dissemination systems through plans, policies, and actions, and financial allocations made for early warning and multi-hazard early warning systems. So this slide provides an overview of the approach and methodology we adopted to conduct the study. I will not get into the details for this presentation, and these can be these can be found in the report in detail. However, we looked at the exposure maps at the state level for extreme floods and cyclones event. Then we identified the population that is exposed to floods and cyclones. Further, we identified the availability of flood and cyclone early warning systems in these states. We calculated the population to which these early warning systems are available and mapped the percent population with the exposed population. To assess the accessibility, we identified the scope of teledensity in Indian states from the TRAI database for 2022 and mapped the percent population with access to information or means to access of information with the exposed population. And finally, to assess the effectiveness of early warning systems, we assess the administrative frameworks in place in Indian states through state disaster management plans and financial mechanisms for utilization of funds through state disaster management plans and funding allocated in the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project. This is how the calculation for the indicators was done. And an overall score indicates the performance of early warning systems in the particular state, contributing to the state's resilience. The following range of resilience was finalized based on a normalized score. Finally, to assess early warning systems and how they are helping Indian states in building their resilience and reducing the impacts of disasters, the states were ranked from most to least resilient based on the aggregated scores obtained from the early warning systems. Now, I'll walk you through to the results and key findings from our study. As our research focuses primarily on hydromet disasters, we look at two types of early warning systems in India, that is floods and cyclones. The Center Water Commission, that is CWC, is the nodal flood forecasting agency in India, which has installed over 331 flood forecasting stations in the country till 2022. IMD supports this flood forecasting services by providing observed and forecasted rainfall measures. Many states have also partnered with private companies for installation of flood early warning systems, specifically for better dissemination of information to the communities. For example, MHEWS in Assam and iFlows in Maharashtra, Mumbai. In India, 7 cyclone warning centers have been established by the India Meteorological Department, which has developed state-of-the-art cyclone warning services under the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project. Suitable structures and non-structural measures to mitigate the impacts of cyclones in the coastal states of India are a key initiative under this project in collaboration with the National Disaster Management Authority of India. The center and several states have also developed a number of APIs, apps, and dashboards to transfer the information to the communities, such as Satark, TN Smart, and the recently launched Common Alerting Protocol system. So, what is the status of availability of flood early warning systems in India? We find that while 72% of districts in India are exposed to extreme flood events, only 25% of districts have an availability of flood early warning systems. For our study, we are only taking into consideration level flood forecast stations, as they are primarily responsible for river basin monitoring and providing early warnings to the communities. So it looks like 2 out of 3 individuals in India are currently exposed to extreme events. However, only 1 out of 3 of these individuals in flood-prone areas have an availability of flood early warning system. But we would like to raise an emphasis that as India witnesses an increase in erratic weather pattern events and increase in flood events due to climate change, flood early warning systems need to be made available to a larger population in India. For cyclone early warning systems, we find that 11 states in India are covered by 7 cyclone warning centers. However, all the population exposed in cyclone prone areas has availability of early warning systems, as cyclone early warning systems cover a larger area than flood early warning systems. Now, this slide presents how accessible these systems are. This suggests that most of India's exposed population can access early warning information by a mobile or telephone connection. However, to access this information, early warning and early warning dissemination systems must be available. Therefore, the possibility of making this information available to population and accessible to population is very high. If early warning systems are made available, the information to reach the masses and the infrastructure to reach the masses already exists. Finally, how effective are these systems? We find that 24 out of 32 states exposed to extreme flood events mention institutional mechanisms and clearly cite their roles and elements of early warning systems in their state disaster management plans. However, only 6 flood exposed districts have a moderate utilization of funds allocated for establishing flood early warning systems. Overall, 9 states with high exposure to extreme flood events also have an effective flood early warning system in place. For cyclone early warning systems in India, 14 out of 17 states exposed to extreme cyclone events have effective administrative frameworks in place. Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, and West Bengal have high utilization of funds allocated for cyclone early warning systems. However, these were the states that were covered in phase 1 of the NCRMP, therefore have better fund utilization than the states covered in the second phase of NCRMP. Finally, 10 states with moderate to high exposure to extreme cyclone events have a moderate to highly effective cyclone early warning system in place. So, what is the resilience that is contributed to by early warning systems in Indian states? We find that 14 Indian states have exposed to floods have high resilience due to flood early warning systems, and all states exposed to cyclones have a moderate to high resilience due to availability, accessibility, and effectiveness of cyclone multi-hazard early warning systems. Now, how can we build India's resilience using some of these early warning systems? First, state disaster management authorities should mainstream inclusive, impact-based, and community-led multi-hazard early warning systems to move towards end-to-end and people-centered early warning systems. Secondly, states should strengthen early warning dissemination systems by leveraging new age technologies to reach the masses and the ones most impacted by the impacts of extreme events. Third, the states, in collaboration with the Central Water Commission, should invest in regional real-time flood monitoring microsensors, as floods are a very localized event and need to be monitored at a scale that is lesser than the district. Further, states and central governments should promote public-private partnerships to enhance early warning efficiency that has been implemented successfully during the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project of India. And flood early warning stations can take a page out of cyclone early warning stations installed in India from this. Finally, India should leverage knowledge transfer through international cooperations and leverage its G20 presidency and its stand at COP28 and be the voice of Southeast Asia to make early warning systems available for all. So now we have come to an end of the presentation, and I would like to thank you all for paying attention to the presentation. The detailed results, findings, and the methodologies can be found in the report that we are launching shortly. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shreya, for taking us through the findings of our new study. Our keynote speaker for the event, Dr. Mrityunjay Mohapatra, could not join us here due to some urgent commitments, but we are grateful to him for providing a video recording to us for his keynote address, which we will play. Dr. Mrityunjay Mohapatra is the Director General of Meteorology at India Meteorology Department, a permanent representative of India with WMO, and has been elected as the 3rd Vice President of WMO. With a PhD in physics and 28 years of experience in meteorology, He has made significant contributions to the improvement of early warning systems in India and of IMD. With bringing several laurels to the country and known as the Cyclone Man of India, I would now request the video to be played.
Namaskar. Good morning to all of you, distinguished invitees and participants for this workshop. Dr. Rajendra Ratnu, Executive Director, National Institute of Disaster Management, Mrs. Sujata Saunik, Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Maharashtra, Dr. Uma Maheswaran, Advisor, CDRI, Mrs. Mikha Pal, GIZ India, Dr. Vaibhav Chaturvedi, fellow CEEW, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I congratulate CEEW for conceiving this idea and organizing this August workshop. I thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this program. The program is very timely, considering the fact that India experiences a number of natural disasters. However, 80% of the natural disasters are weather and water related. And if I consider the losses due to disasters, it is about 5% of the gross domestic product. So therefore, the life and livelihood are affected by the disasters occurring in any country. India, with a varied physiographical regions, bound by the Himalayas to the north, Arabian Sea to the west, Bay of Bengal to the east, and Indian Ocean to the south, and with Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats and the west coast and east coast, deserts in the west, Myanmar hills in the northeast, along with the Garo Khasi Jaintia hills, we are confronted with the various types of weather and water related disasters. And all the disasters are impacting the people due to this varied physiography of the region, along with many other reasons. I just want to mention that India is such a country where you can find out almost all types of disasters that affect the world. India experiences tropical cyclones both from Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea, about 5 in number every year. India experiences southwest monsoon during June to September, and also northeast monsoon during October to December. And during southwest monsoon, about 70 to 90% of the annual water is received by India. But however, monsoon shows large-scale variations, leading to floods and droughts in different parts of the country simultaneously. There are interannual variations in the magnitude and distribution of the rainfall. And also there is intra-seasonal variations within the season itself, leading to sometimes the heavy wet spells and sometimes the long dry spells. Also, the monsoon season is categorized by the monsoonal low pressure systems, including lows, depressions, and sometimes the cyclones, like this year, the cyclone Biparjoy over Arabian Sea, which affected Gujarat and then Rajasthan. We also have very intense lightning activity, thunderstorms, hailstorms, squalls, and gustiness in winds during the monsoon season. It needs to mention that cyclone is a multi-hazard. It leads to heavy rainfall causing floods. It is also associated with the strong winds leading to damage to the structures. And also there is tidal wave, which is popularly called a storm surge, inundating the coastal areas. All these hazards occur simultaneously, creating a multi-hazard scenario. You have seen recent time how the interaction of western disturbance with the monsoonal flow pattern caused devastation in northwest India. It caused immense loss to our properties,
in the states of Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, Haryana, Punjab, and to some extent in other parts like Delhi, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. So therefore, we can expect potential losses due to the large-scale disasters associated with cyclones and monsoons. But apart from that, India also experiences thunderstorms and lightning, being a tropical country. The thunderstorms are very furious, especially in eastern India and northeastern states. Popularly, they are called as the Kal Boishakhi, as it is furious and maximum number occurs in the month of Baishakh. The number of people dying due to cyclones over the years has reduced because of the improvement in early warning systems, improvement in response sections, coordinated mechanism, disaster management plan, and also the various preparedness, prevention, and mitigation actions in the country. Similarly, the number of deaths due to heavy rainfall has also decreased over the years. If I compare the episode of Uttarakhand in 2013 and the episode which occurred this year in 2023, over the 10 years period, there is an overwhelming improvement in terms of early warning system, in terms of detection and predictions, and also in terms of the preparedness, prevention, and mitigation by the disaster management agencies and general public. But however, over the period of years, we have been able to minimize the number of deaths, but the loss of property is increasing because the socioeconomic progress is increasing in the country. So therefore, more properties are at stake due to the natural disasters. Now, considering the thunderstorms and associated weather like hailstorms, squalls, lightning, it is observed that almost about 2,500 people die every year due to the lightning. So therefore, lightning has become a challenge while we have almost fought with and conquered the disasters like tropical cyclones. As lightning is a very small scale event, its time period is very less, and also it affects very smaller area. Its detection is also difficult, and its predictions. But however, over the years, India Meteorological Department and its organizations like Ministry of Earth Sciences, Indian Institute of National Center for Midwinter Weather Forecasting are working together, and we have developed a modeling system for prediction of lightning in the country. India is one among the 5 countries in the world which has got the lightning warning system. Also, about lightning detection system in collaboration with Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology and Indian Air Force. So at present, we are providing the zone, that is potential zone of occurrence of thunderstorms 5 days ahead. And 3 days ahead, we identify the districts which are expected to have the lightning. On the day of occurrence of lightning, we go on providing more specific information about the districts and the locations where we expect the lightning and thunderstorms. Not only that, we follow it up with every 3 hours, providing the very short range forecast called as the nowcast. So there has been overwhelming development with respect to this mesoscale event, so as to enable the disaster managers to minimize the loss of lives and properties due to the thunderstorms and associated weather, including lightning. There is another challenge, that is the heavy rainfall. Heavy rainfall sometimes occurs over a small area, and when it occurs over the hilly regions, it causes the landslides, it causes the mudslides, mudslips, mud sinks. Also, it causes the flash floods. With the increasing population of urban areas, the urban flooding has become another challenge in the country. So therefore, considering all these, India Meteorological Department at present is not only issuing the weather forecast, but also we are issuing the impact-based weather forecast and risk-based warning. There has been development of dynamic composite risk atlas led by National Disaster Management Authority in association with India Meteorological Department and many other agencies and the state agencies. It has been implemented since 2021. In the recent cyclone Biparjoy, the products from these were generated and IMD circulated these products to the public and to disaster managers. The system is available even to the blocks and Tahsil level, and it evaluates the expected damages, the expected losses at village level. So from the simple weather forecasting, now we have come to a stage where we provide the weather forecast of the cyclones, we provide the loss forecast, the damage expected, so that before the landfall of the cyclone, the disaster managers know the expected losses in terms of rupees and also in terms of the quantity. And accordingly, the risk financing and risk forecasting has been possible in the country with respect to tropical cyclones. Similar approach is being developed with respect to heavy rainfall, thunderstorms, heat waves, cold waves. There is another success story in heat wave and cold wave. The number of deaths due to heat waves and cold waves has reduced significantly to single digit or double digit. It is mainly because of the seamless weather forecast system on heat wave, starting with the seasonal forecast in the beginning of the season, followed by the extended range forecast for next 4 weeks every Thursday, followed by the 5 days forecast and warning every day at the district level, and then on the day of occurrence, the nowcast. So there is a seamless forecast system not only for heat waves and cold waves, but also for all types of forecasting. All these, what I told you, the success story, has been possible because of the technological interventions. Technology is key to success. Technology played a dominant role in early warning system improvement over the years. We have moved from analog type of early warning system to a digital type of early warning system. We have improved all components of early warning system in terms of the observations, detections, analysis, modeling, weather forecasting, early warning products generation, presentation, and disseminations. We have come up with 37 Doppler weather radars in the country compared to only 15 radars 10 years back. We have come up with more than 1,000 automated weather stations in the country over the years. And we have come up with 5,800 rain gauge stations being considered for analysis of rainfall in the country on daily basis. We have come up with 2 satellites at present, INSAT 3D and INSAT 3DR, to provide pictures of the clouds every 15 minutes, while Doppler weather radars in the country provides the pictures of every 6 minutes to 10 minutes. In addition, radar has the facility to find out the winds distribution in the clouds and to find out the water content of the clouds and to study the internal structure of the clouds. So we, as early warning agents in the country, utilize all types of observation systems in a complementary manner to find out the current status of ocean, atmosphere, and the land. At the same time, all these observations are digitized and assimilated in an array of numerical weather prediction models. We have got about 6 global and regional models being run every day twice. But however, models differ from each other. With the help of an objective decision support system, a digital forecasting platform, the forecasters compare, comprehend, and analyze each and every observations and each and every model guidance. And finally, take a decision about the current status and the forecast up to next 5 days, 7 days, few hours, or for a month, or for a season. With this improvement, I want to mention that apart from the technology intervention in terms of the observations, there has been technology intervention in terms of the numerical models. The models adopted from US and UK has been customized with better understanding of the physical processes governing the various severe weather events. And warning products generation dissemination has taken a boost with the improvement in information and communication technology in the country. Recently, we come up with the Common Alert Protocol, where NDMA has enabled the state agencies as authority to disseminate the warning generated by the early warning agencies like India Meteorological Department. The Common Alert Protocol has the facility to send the SMS directly to all mobile service holders. Anyone having a mobile system can have the access to early warning issued by IMD. I was told about 1 crore SMS was sent during Cyclone Biparjoy to state of Gujarat and Rajasthan. Similarly, we have also come up with the new dissemination systems like mobile apps. India Meteorology Department and Minister of Arts Sciences have introduced the mobile app like MHEWS for farmers. We have the Damini for lightning purpose. We have a Mosam mobile app for general weather forecasting, cyclone warning. Also, there is Umang mobile app by the Government of India, where all the information corresponding to weather are available, especially the severe weather. Not only that, IMD has come up a long way with respect to the social media. As all of us know, the social media is faster, quicker, and action is also important, instantaneous. So we have taken this advantage. We have the platform like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course the YouTube. We have gone for public-private participation with Google, AccuWeather, and many more, Windy TV, etc., for dissemination of information by India Meteorological Department. So while I am telling about India Meteorology Department and role of technology for disaster risk reduction, which has been demonstrated globally and appreciated by various agencies, including United Nations, I want to mention that collaboration is also another factor which resulted in this success and will need further collaboration in future nationally and internationally for further improvement in early warning systems. In this regard, I just want to mention that the non-government organizations like CEEW can play a dominant role with respect to the capacity building, with respect to the extension of services. I think there is almost no sector at present in the society which is not affected by weather and climate. There is a lot of stake in each and every sector where weather can play an intervention and hence minimize the losses. So therefore, there is enough scope for the public-private partnership with various agencies. So I urge upon the various agencies to work together with the India Meteorology Department. But however, the early warning is the major responsibility of India Meteorology Department. That cannot be given by the private agencies. But private agencies can complement, can extend our warning services and provide to people and various stakeholders. And also, there is scope to go for dissemination, to go for capacity building of various types of stakeholders and prepare the products as per the requirement of these users. We've also come up with a scheme like startup. We're encouraging the startup to work with India Meteorological Department, where we will provide the data, we'll provide the knowledge, and also in some cases, we may come up with some financial support. So by that way, we look forward further and we hope the disaster risk reduction will be improved further in the country with not only the improvement early warning system, but also in all other aspects, including the hazard analysis, vulnerability analysis, risk assessment, impact assessment, and preparedness, prevention, and mitigation measures. There is another towards the disaster risk reduction, that is the resilience. The resilience can be achieved by the society, by the external interventions, and also by society themselves. There is need for increasing awareness, there is need for increasing response action by the individuals, and there is need for disaster resilient infrastructure. As all of us know that India plays a dominant role in the globe as the chair of the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure. So therefore, this improved early warning, improved preparedness and preventions, we can further hope to improve our resilience in all sectors, and also we can sustain our development goals. I hope in today's interaction, we will come up with very good recommendations, suggestions for further improvement in all components of hazard management so that no hazard need not be a disaster. We can restrict the hazard to be a hazard itself, and also we can minimize the loss of life and property further. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Dr. Mohapatra once again for really summing up 28 years of his experience and work in this video, and also highlighting how technological innovation is key to strengthening India's disaster preparedness. I would now request Ms. Vadhavan, the author of the report, and our panelist, Mr. Ratnu, Dr. Rajasekar, Ms. Paul, Dr. Ghosh, Dr. Chaturvedi, and Dr. Chetale for a photo of the report launch to please come on stage. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
We'll now be having a tea break for half an hour and we'll reassemble at 11:50. Thank you. So I request everyone to be seated. Thank you. So welcome back to all of you. We will now be moving to the next segment of the event, which is a moderated panel discussion, where we will really try and break down India's disaster preparedness as we witness with Biparjoy and how we can further strengthen it. We have our esteemed panelists joining us for this discussion. Mr. Rajendra Ratnu, I'd like to introduce him and call him on stage, who is an IAS officer of 2001 batch of Tamil Nadu cadre. He is at the helm of affairs at the National Institute of Disaster Management, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India as the executive director. So I'd like you to come on stage. Mr. Rajendra, if you can come on stage. Thank you. Dr. Uma Maheshwaran Rajasekar, who is the Urban Resilience Advisor at the Coalition for Disaster Resilience Infrastructure, CDRI. He has over 2 decades of experience developing country engagement strategies for bilateral and multilateral national policies on climate actions, disaster resilience programs, and knowledge products, including digital tools and training programs. So if I can request you, sir, to please come on stage. Thank you. I'd also like to call upon Ms. Mika Hannah-Paul, who is a senior advisor at GIZ India, and she works in the Environment, Climate Change, and Natural Resource Management program. She is currently the project manager for the Indo-German Development Cooperation Project, which is called Enhancing Rural Resilience through Appropriate Development Actions. Thank you. We will also be shortly joined by Ms. Sujata Sonik, who is traveling all the way from Mumbai for this event and this discussion with us. She is the Additional Chief Secretary in the Home Department and General Administration Department of the Government of Maharashtra, and her research interests fall at the cross-section of public health, climate change, and disaster management. With this, I would now like to welcome all of our panelists once again, and will now hand over the floor to Dr. Chaturvedi, who will be moderating the session.
Very good afternoon to all. Thank you for joining this discussion. In the morning, I think Dr. Mahapatra had a very interesting speech, and he talked a lot about how across the years, India's disaster preparedness has grown by leaps and bounds. And it's very clear in terms of the number of lives and livelihoods we have managed to save in the last many years. But it is also clear that the situation of disasters is also continuously evolving, right? We are increasing the frequency and intensity of disasters. It's not just the climate science is telling us. We are very visibly seeing a lot of that kind of happening. So the context is also rapidly evolving, and that's how our disaster preparedness also has to kind of continuously evolve. It's already also evolving in that direction. So this makes for a very interesting kind of panel and session today. We've got a stellar panel. We're still waiting for Ms. Sonik, as her flight was delayed. She'll be joining us very shortly. So let me start with you, Mr. Ratnu. The policy, the importance that policy is giving now to this issue is very, very clear, right? And 2 examples come to my mind. One is, of course, the creation of the CDRI itself. That is very clearly the leadership that India has shown. Second, more recently, is the 10-point agenda released by the Prime Minister, right, on disaster risk reduction, right? So within this context, so it's very clear policy, the importance of the policy level this issue is getting is at a very high level. Now, from your perspective, what is really the importance of this PM's 10-point agenda on DRR? Why is it really important for us? And what is the role that NIDM has now in enhancing disaster preparedness across the country, and especially within the context of early warning system? Over to you, sir.
So you have asked a very huge question. So let me first come to the PM's 10-point agenda. So this was the Asian Ministerial Conference in 2016, when I think Honorable Prime Minister has given this 10-point agenda, and it also supplements the Sendai framework in many ways. And clearly there is a focus on many of the areas that we are talking today. So that has been very much captured in PM's 10-point agenda, including investment in disaster resilient infrastructure, mainstreaming of the DRR in development sectors. It also talks about strengthening the early warning system, which was also today one of the focus areas of today's discussion. PM's 10-point agenda also talks about local capacity building, which is very, very important, that despite all technological advancement, understanding the risk, mapping the risk, assessing the risk, and technological thing. When technology, everything surprises you. And if the communities are resilient and if their capacities are built, still we can. So finally, it is the communities which are going to. That is also so. It gives from, for example, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure is a global thought coming out of this 10-point agenda. On the 10-point agenda talks about the international collaborations, knowledge dissemination. On the other end, it also talks about the local capacity. So it is a very, very pragmatic and a roadmap for India's preparedness towards, so that India's growth story can be resilient, and also it can factor in the disaster in its developmental planning. So this is your first part of the question. I hope
Yes,
I've been
yes.
able to.
Thank you so much for highlighting this. It moves from the national cooperation agenda to the local community. Because the spectrum is wide and a lot of important things are covered. In fact, I do remember that it also talks about in the local capacities. It also talks about importance of gender, importance of ensuring poor community, especially in the. I mean, these are specific agendas in many of the 10-point items. And it also talks about specifically mention mobile telephony. In one of the items, it mentions about mobile specifically, which could be used as a very important, effective instrument from the early warning systems perspective. Now, coming to NIDM's role, how is NIDM, let's say, building capacities of different institutions? Because you highlighted that as a very important agenda. So what is the role, and what is the your perspective on future outlook on this particular point?
Thank you. Started with a very important note about local capacities, also talking about gender, and your story of Mandakini ki Awaaz very well captures the voice of the female and the gender in that area. But just one note that still our idioms, our phrases, they are so masculine that our moderator, when he started हिम्मते मर्द मददे खुदा, और पूरी स्टोरी में कोई मर्द नहीं है, लेकिन हिम्मत मर्द की होती है. तो I think we have to also rediscover our new phrases which are more gender neutral. खूब लड़ी मर्दानी वो तो झांसी वाली रानी थी. मतलब लड़ाई झांसी की रानी ने की, लेकिन उसका जो वर्ड उसको उसकी ब्रेवरी को कैप्चर कर रहा है वो मर्दानी थी. तो आप बहादुर हो तो आप औरत हो ही नहीं सकते. दिस इज समथिंग which is I think we have to change not only our disaster planning, but I think our cultural nuances which are deep rooted into gender. We have to work on all fronts to see that really it becomes a disaster sensitive and we become more inclusive in our approach. So coming back to NIDM's role in disaster, I think NIDM is trying to work on many fronts. It is a body. Let me, for the audience who are new and some of them youngsters are also there. So I just like to tell that the NIDM's origin is in the there was a conference in Yokohama or 1994 where there was a discussion that there should be a knowledge is very important in the disasters. And that time in 1995, there was a National Center for Disaster Management was created in Ministry of Agriculture, and that is how the genesis of this organization is there. And then gradually it moved. There was a super cyclone in Odisha, and then was a Bhuj earthquake in 2001. And in that backdrop, this organization was moved from agriculture to home ministry, because of in that context it was felt that there has to be a single point of command for better coordinated response. So that is how the NIDM was given. 2005 it was given a statutory mandate under Disaster Management Act, where it defines its role as to what are the functions that it is supposed to deliver. So we are training, capacity building, a knowledge house. We are also policy advocacy wing, and into research, etc. We also look forward to many collaborations in working. As far as so we are doing a large number of training program with the key stakeholders, and there is a multiplier impact. We normally encourage on training of trainers rather than we ourselves going into the last mile connectivity. but we have also recently taken, for example, on community radio, we are already working with the Ministry of Broadcasting to, see that how the community radio can become again a tool in the last mile, capacity gaps we can bridge through them. NIDM is also working with all the line ministries, and we are, slightly changing our strategy to, without compromising our focus with the states and ATIs and other institutional partners. We are also focusing now on mainstreaming DRR, so it does not become NDMA or NIDM's responsibility, but each of the sector or each of the ministries at Government of India also, and we are also helping many of them in their preparation of the disaster management plans where they are not prepared. Wherever the plans are prepared, we are working with them to evolve an action plan for rolling out the training, training program in a more cascade kind of thing, so that there is a national level policymakers, the implementers, monitoring mechanism at the state level and up to district and the below, we can reach out through our partners. So I think it's a high time we have to realize that each sector has to imbibe the DRR framework and it has to be mainstreamed into all the developmental sectors. I'm also would like to share that NIDM is also now trying to see that how the PM Gati Shakti framework can be also used, and we are trying to do policy advocacy in that direction, that there's a huge potential of using the Prime Minister's Gati Shakti program, which is a national master plan for multimodal connectivity. It is essentially that any 500 crore projects in 16 or 17 ministries, which include all the infrastructure ministries as well as the economic ministries, any infrastructure which is being created, there is a network planning group, and there is a network planning group is a group of the heads of all the technical wings of these planning heads of all these departments. So they see the interlinkages, and rather than working in silos, there is a more of synergy between the departments to see that. So that gives a very, very, transformative tool it is turning out to be. There are more than 1,600 data layers which have been, BISEG has, created a huge database to support this program. And at the level of DPR or planning itself, they are using this data to see that how the DPRs become more realistic, optimistic in terms of last mile connectivity, etc. But one of the latent benefit of this framework is that it is also has a huge potential to bring disaster resilience into our infrastructure planning itself, so that we do not, because it also has, risk mapping inbuilt into that framework. So automatically your risk zonation and risk understanding becomes more at the time of the planning of the projects. So these are many of the initiatives of NIDM. We are reaching out to the last mile through various verticals of the state as well as the central government. And we are also focusing, I'm also very happy to share that another Prime Minister 10-point agenda, one point was about the network of the educational institutions. And in compliance to that, NIDM has built a network of more than 250 universities and institutions. And this gives a very promising, outcome of this thing. And we are trying to see so many, programs we are planning to run with these universities. We are also thinking to create the state level chapters and the local chapters of these knowledge networks. We are doing some pilots in this regard, and based upon that, we'll be scaling that up. So I think NIDM is, and as you know, that we are not the disaster managers, we are more on the thinking, envisioning, documenting. We are done the documentation of the disaster, we reach immediately there and try to document those things now. So we are in a way the silent workers of the disaster management fraternity.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ratna, for sharing all that with us. You are very humble in saying you're the silent workers. In fact, the documentation part is also one of the agenda item, one of the 10-point agenda items, that we have to learn from disasters so that we are better prepared. And that's a very interesting part of the agenda itself, and the learning from existing experience, and the formally put it in the agenda. It's very interesting. You talked about many very novel things, at least to my using that, this whole PM Gati Shakti, and trying to leverage that, this network of universities that you talked about. And before that, you also talked about some very important things like inclusivity. I mean, gender, poor, vulnerable section, the whole point about inclusivity of many different actors, and your approach of training of trainers. And one thing definitely was music to my ears was about, you talked about this interdepartmental or interministerial collaboration, right? That you are yourself working, reaching out to the for the broadcasting ministry, but also many other line ministries to mainstream DRR. So I think you are very humble in saying that it is a silent work. I think mainstreaming is a very important agenda that clearly your institute is pushing, and you are leading it. So thank you for that. Now let me come to Dr. Rajshekhar. You are advising CEEW part. The I remember when I used to see on television, this whole, yeah. Please, Ms. Sonic, please join us. Please, yeah. Yeah, great. Thank you, Ms. Sonic, for joining us today. We're just warming up in the discussion. So we look forward to your comments also. So Dr. Rajshekhar, I'll just come to you. I do remember when I visualized the scenes of floods and all on television 10, 15 years back, it was always about rural areas. I do remember Bihar very vividly, because it was floods and we saw a lot of rural areas. And generally speaking, that was a visual images. Increasingly, I'm seeing images of urban areas, right? The Bangalore floods, the Delhi floods. Clearly, there are many new areas that are being, struck by disasters now. And you're, of course, advising CDRI on that particular aspect. Could you tell us more about what is the role of CDRI, how it is handling this whole thing, newly emerging thing which are related to urban areas, how it is difficult or different? And within the context of early warning systems, are the strategies different between urban and rural areas? Like how they evolve? Look forward to it. Thank you.
Hello. Thank you for that interesting question. Before I dwell into the aspect of early warning and urban areas and how things are panning out, let me give you a brief around CDRI. Many of you know it's a coalition for disaster resilience infrastructure. So it was formed in 2019, and it was an initiative of our Prime Minister, and it was passed through a UN resolution. And I'm also glad to say that the Parliament officially, the Parliamentary Committee officially approved CDRI to be an international organization just a couple of days back. So we are a coalition of 31 member countries, and we also have 8 partner agencies, which includes UN and also some of the multilateral development bank. And the focus of CDRI is how we can augment resources, especially the financial resources, but also technical understanding of risk to build resilience, especially in critical areas such as roads, telecom, mobility in general, transportation, telecom, power sector, but also our recent focus is on SIDS, the small island development states, how we can enhance their capacity in terms of including resilience with their upcoming initiatives. Our focus is also towards urban areas, and our urban strategy is currently under development. So there are 2 aspects to it. One is on water, both the lack of water and also the excess water in urban area, leading to floods and waterlogging and inundation. We are also planning to focus on heat, which is slowly emerging to be a disaster, leading to more number of infrastructure assets getting affected. You must have seen the roads melting, and also some of the airlines and air services getting stopped. Even Delhi Metro, when the temperature crosses 40 degrees, the tracks heat up, and because of that, there is also deformation which happens in some of the places. The train services are delayed or they are stopped for a certain duration. Okay, coming to floods. Before I jump into the question, we have a wonderful audience here, and let me engage all of you. How many of you got the warning for the Delhi floods a couple of days back? Pretty much one third of the people got a warning in this particular room. So how different and difficult it is to work around early warning systems in urban areas. Currently, whatever IMD provides, they provide flood warning at a district level. That is the resolution at which most of our satellites, we have few weather satellites which keep monitoring and providing us information every 15 minutes. But the resolution of those satellites do not cater to urban areas. So that's the problem which everyone is trying to address. The number of weather stations in urban area, the density, usually what they say is we should have one per square kilometer, which doesn't exist. Delhi has a lot of stations. Mumbai has a lot of stations. Mumbai has augmented its monitoring capacity in the last decade or so. But a lot of cities do not have the sufficient resolution to make the nowcast much more meaningful. The third problem is, it doesn't mean that if it rains here, it'll flood here. Our road network, our drainage network, the stormwater drainage systems are designed for certain, carrying capacity. Usually in India, Britishers, when they came and they came up with the system of 150 mm of rainfall over 24 hours. That's what our stormwater drainage across the country is designed for. That means that if you get what we got in Delhi was more than, I think, 200 mm of rainfall, right? So it's bound to be flooded because our systems are not designed to carry or take these excess rainfall, and the extreme weather situation is changing. What was the normal for the month of July, we got it over a 24-hour period, and 30% more, than what the month of July experiences on an average. So these are the challenges, and you can't do warning systems which can address all these things. Of course, you can do a nowcast, but we never know that whether a certain stormwater drainage gets clogged up, the flooding happens in a different area, And I had experience of, doing some advanced flood modeling. But what we have also realized, even that is the case in Delhi, some of the older, stormwater drainage, the invert levels are not properly mentioned. So whatever we know of the stormwater drainage, it's very limited. The sedimentation, siltation which happens in it, we have no account for it. Nobody gets into these drains and measure it on a regular basis or pre-monsoon basis. Nobody does the pre-monsoon cleaning of these stormwater drains, while some drains are cleaned, but not all the drains are cleaned. And three, our road network, what keeps happening over time is they are supposed to remove the surface and relay the road. But that's a costly affair. So most of the time what they do is they overlay on the existing road network. So if you would have observed in your area, probably 20 years back, your house plinth must have been like 1 feet or 2 feet above the road level. But now your road level is 2 feet above your plinth level. So that leads to water coming into your neighborhood, community, and houses. So the urban terrain keeps changing drastically. And even if you have a warning, you can never predict whether your area is going to get flooded or not. Even with a detailed flood modeling, it becomes much more complicated. So these are broader complexities. What we are doing about it, I'm sure our understanding of urban flood systems have improved over time. What we know and what we don't know is getting, enhanced time and again. We are starting to enhance our network for monitoring these weather stations, weather services. There are private networks right now coming into play, which are also informing, multiple stakeholders. The ICCC, I think that is the Integrated Command and Control Center. Till today, urban areas are not, I would say, commissioners in cities are not responsible for disaster management. It is the district collector. I think NDMA, NIDM, they are now changing the law. The Disaster Management Act is getting rethought, reworked. There is additional investments which are coming from smart cities, installing these integrated command and control center. Mumbai has one of the most advanced command and control center. And during the G20 event, we were given an opportunity to also visit. Most of the people, experienced what and how, the city of Mumbai, the municipal corporation of Mumbai is acting towards these disasters. There is an additional funding, 250 crores per city is being provided as part of the MHEWS 14th and 15th Finance Commission, along with NDMA, to cities to enhance their flood mitigation measures. And 50% of that funding, this is 250 crores per city, but 50% of that funding is towards nature-based solutions. Right now, stormwater drains, which are being used for 30 days, we are investing 30% of the municipal budget. Just imagine, you're using a system only for these extreme, they don't even manage the extreme rainfall. For the rainfall, which is used only for 30 days, but you're spending 30% of your municipal budget towards it, and still people are not getting respite from it. So how do we create nature-based solutions? How do you create retention ponds? How do you create strategic flood areas? You make it, we always have these areas which get flooded. Why don't we strategically identify areas where flood water can be collected, and over 2 or 3 days time, how do we identify, payments where we can have these infiltration wells, designed,
Yes.
and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of options. Good progress has happened in the last 5 to 10 years. And I think India would see, some good flood management measures in the coming years. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rajshekhar, for ending on this positive note. You also emphasized the importance of nature-based solutions, which are absolutely critical. But you also made a very interesting technical point that the face of urban areas is changing so rapidly. It's not just about our flood forecasting system, but for managing those, the impact on the ground, we need to understand the rapidly changing nature of the cities itself, which is another order of challenge. When you're talking about practically implementing that on ground. Interestingly, you talked about Mumbai, and that's a great segue for us to talk to you, Ms. Sonic. First of all, thank you so much for coming from Mumbai all the way, for participating in this discussion. Really appreciate that. We look forward to listening to you. The question I have for you, all the Mumbai has been increasingly now, and we see very visibly being hit by floods like every third year, fourth year, and clearly, as Dr. Rajshekhar also mentioned, the G20 delegation also really appreciated the efforts put on by BMC in terms of enhancing the resilience of the city. So if you could talk about that a bit, what has happened in terms of interventions within the city, but also beyond Mumbai. Mumbai is very important because it's the financial center of the country, but also there are many other cities rapidly and growing, and there are also drought-prone areas in the state. The disasters is not just about urban flood, but there's a vast many different kinds of disasters. So what is also the state doing along with all the interventions in Mumbai to kind of better prepare many other areas also for these increasing disasters?
So very good afternoon to everyone, and very happy to be part of this August panel. Let me start with the CEEW itself. So, it's your own report, which says that Maharashtra is one of the most vulnerable states in the country, where we are also facing double disasters in the same location, and the vulnerability index has gone up to almost all disasters. And sometimes you could have a flood and a drought happening in the same location because our districts are big. Nasik, for example, one of the districts is of Maharashtra, is 30,000 square kilometers. It's larger than many small European countries. Ahmednagar, which is the largest district in Maharashtra, is also very huge, and the topography is very different in Maharashtra. So you have the western plateau, and then you have very dry and arid areas, and then there is dense forestation in some of the tribal and remote areas. So each area has its own challenges. So with this background, what has happened in the recent years is, of course, after the famous Mumbai 2005 flooding, a better understanding and appreciation based on the scientific inputs given by many organizations, including the CEEW. I would add IITM in that, which is based out of Pune, the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, and of course, the IMD itself, and IIT Mumbai, which is one of the technically very sound institutions which provide a lot of very detailed analyses of what is happening. And based on all of this, the State Disaster Management Authority, which is a very strong body in Maharashtra, has been able to create, district level planning for the state of Maharashtra, which is helping the urban,
Closer, please.
The urban and the the urban as well as the overall district administration to make their disaster management plans. And I think the CEEW itself is engaged with the SDMA currently. Although I would like to discuss more in detail with you about what are some of the specific areas that more collaboration is needed, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I want to specifically mention that whether it is putting more resources available through the Finance Commission funding, as well as the local authorities making provisions in their budgets, and as well as state level budgeting. That is one of the main sources of putting in a proper system in place. So you must have visited the control room of, that's become quite well known now across the country. These kind of control rooms are being replicated in other districts as well. So I'm the guardian secretary of Thane. So all of us are given one district to be taking care of as a guardian. So Thane also has been in the recent past seeing a lot of flooding. And in fact, the entire Greater Mumbai region has become like the Pune metropolitan region, one big mass of urbanization that needs attention. In addition to making sure that the requisite infrastructure and the plans are in place, there is an emphasis put on giving training. So I myself, in my current assignment of being in charge of the administrative reforms and office management department, which looks at intersectoral issues concerning more than one department and bringing better, collaboration, coordination, and communication between them, have been working on imparting climate change related training to all the district collectors, the district civil surgeons, the district police, and other stakeholders who are part of the district administration, to better equip them to understand what is really going on. Because typically the revenue administration will respond in a very predictable way. So for them to understand that what is happening and how they can be part of the response in a more effective way, it's so important to give them proper training. So we have the State Training Institute, the Apex Training Institute called Yashoda in Pune. So under the aegis of Yashoda, we conduct regular training for our officers before the monsoon season starts, during the monsoon season, then there's a lessons learned debrief session that we hold at the end of the monsoon period, in which we encourage them to do more data analysis by using open source data available. So that census data to begin with, and also doing hotspot mapping where the recent events have happened, and do you do a death audit, we do an event audit. That what happened, how it happened, what could have helped in providing a better response, and what are the lessons learned for the next time this sort of a thing happens. All of these tools have created better confidence in the district administration and the municipal administration, and help them understand that proper allocation of their own district plan funds is also a very important part of the entire process of having some system in place. In addition, it's not just floods that we look at, we also look at heat, because Maharashtra is one of the states that's very much affected by heat. It was affected this year also. So there are threshold limits fixed, and then more than 7 districts in Maharashtra, NDMA was part of it also. Recently, I think you had a meeting in IIT Mumbai, where there was a national conference on heat action plans. So Maharashtra has 7 districts where heat action plans are active. Another 7 have been added recently. So the total number has gone up to 15, which is almost half of the state. And all these measures have helped to create confidence, better understanding, and a more scientific approach to dealing with the disasters. It's not easy. It's not yet done. We do not know what's coming next, but efforts are on to make sure that we try and deal with the situation as much as possible. One of the areas which is neglected and where more action needs to be taken is that there are so many of these peri-urban areas, or areas where there are a lot of old buildings and there's old infrastructure, where really urban renewal programs have not penetrated that much. So they always remain the challenge and the bane of the local administration, because how do you deal with that? So every year you will hear about a building collapsing and people, getting trapped, and some unfortunately lose their lives, and all of these very humane stories. They have an emotional connect with people, and everyone thinks that, oh, the administration didn't do much. But each of these buildings is earmarked in advance. The people are given a notice that they need to vacate. The problem is, where do they go? So even if they have extended family or other relatives in other parts of the state, they avoid leaving the building. And so they unfortunately become victims of building collapse. And this process continues year after year. So, and then falling of old trees, that has also led to incidents of death of people who are out in the morning or during the day for their regular work. So there are these challenges, and I don't think that, there will be a sort of a solution for them overall. We'll have to deal with them as we go along. So even those trees which are supposed to be pulled down, they are marked, and, instructions are given to the civic authorities to take care of them. But then some odd incident always happens. So my own experience of working in disaster started when I was working in public health, and I realized that both heat and floods, high-speed winds, and cyclone, which Mumbai has seen in the recent past, they have a direct impact on the health of the people. And that's what drew me into dealing with climate action plans and mitigation plans. I have also served in the NDMA, so that helped me, that background. So overall, the lessons I have learned through my own work is that a lot needs to be done, and it has to be done very quickly. Sometimes our processes can be a little slow. So moving ahead quickly is very important. And the information asymmetry is always what impacts policy making. How? That many a times when the leadership is taking review and stock of what's going on, you must have read about the number of times Maharashtra government has given subsidies to the farmers who've been hit badly by heavy rainfall and flooding. We usually do not have, a proper sort of understanding, I would say, of what is going wrong and what needs to change. I mean to say, do you delay sowing? Do you prepone harvesting? Do you guide the farmers who are in, raising horticulture crops about protecting grapes and pomegranates? Because Maharashtra has a huge area under horticulture crops, and these are all cash crops. They pay very well, whether it's the Alfonso, the pomegranate, the sapodilla, or grapes. So giving proper information to the farmers, although it's there and a lot of support is provided through the extension workers, but we rely on a lot of field machinery who goes and connects with these people and pass on the information. We need to have more scientific ways of involving other stakeholders like both audio, video, visual media to provide information to people. Ultimately, the messages that you were talking about, they were received largely by people in the urban areas who are educated enough to open their phones and look at it. right? But when you try to release it through audiovisual media, it can sometimes be sensationalized. So it's always a challenge for the government. How do you reach the end user, the last mile connectivity that we talk always in a very cliched way? So bringing about those systems is what I think is the need of the hour.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Sonic, for the very interesting set of comments. You talked about many, many things. I think one very interesting thing you talked about was that before every event, there is a training, and after every event, there is a stock taking that happens. But what did we learn from this, and how do we better prepare ourselves for the next similar event? You also talked about many different districts in which different kinds of events are happening, and districts are being better prepared. Now, it's not just about Mumbai, but many other districts where the state government is taking action, which is very, very good kind of intervention from the government. And finally, you talked about the human part of it, which of course it's the lives and livelihoods which matter a lot, and that ultimately all the interventions we're talking about is driven towards that and reducing the vulnerability of people. And at times, maybe because of many other challenges that we talked about, like information asymmetry, even the kind of people we're talking about, maybe not educated people, not using so much of phones, how do we reach those kind of people? And that systemic creation is where we look at towards all the other experts here, who will help us in guiding in delivering that kind of system that you, Ms. Sonic, talked about. Now, let me come to you, Ms. Paul. I think it's a great segue because you've been working with communities, a lot with rural communities, specifically. And how do you see, the better preparedness or better capacity building of the rural communities from within the disaster management perspective, and exactly the challenges that Ms. Sonic talked about? Right, a very different kind of people. We're not talking about the urban people. Very different kind of people. Very different set of capabilities and training. Right. How do we, engage with those people for making them better prepared, and what kind of technology systems we think about? Yes, over to you.
Thanks, Vaibhav. Good afternoon. So first of all, let me thank CEEW and especially Vishwas for bringing us to the panel. I was just thinking, so I come from a very different perspective from the other speakers. So we had technology, we had the bureaucracy, and I represent a project which actually works with people and livelihoods in the rural areas and looks at resilience from a very different perspective. So very happy to be here. Maybe before I delve deeper into the project that I represent and the question you asked, Vaibhav, I represent GIZ, which is a German development cooperation. So we work on behalf of the German government since the 1960s in India on a host of topics ranging from climate change, adaptation, finance, climate risk insurance, energy, decentralized renewable energy solutions, now moving into just transition, environment, natural resource management. And I think our strength is we work on bilateral relationship with the Indian ministries, so from environment, forest and climate change to rural development, NABARD, and working with all of these partners. We sit here, we have done some excellent work with NIDM, continuing work with CDRI and CEEW and all of these. Now the project I represent, which is in fact called Irada, so it has a nice Hindi meaning which says strong intent, but it expands as enhancing rural resilience through appropriate development actions. The objective is actually fairly simple. We look at strengthening rural livelihoods of the most vulnerable communities in India. And we work with two of the largest programs in our country and even maybe globally. So one is the Mahatma Gandhi Narega program, which is India's public employment program, the largest in the world, in fact. And the other is the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, which is also one of the largest women empowerment programs that focuses on livelihoods. Now, the idea was we work on strengthening livelihoods, mainly diversifying them, looking at alternate options. Why? On the outset, we have two very broad outcome level objectives. One is to impact the distress and seasonal migration pattern in our country. So, and that's very relevant to, I think, what also ma'am brings about in terms of rural livelihoods and the lives of people. So when COVID hit, we saw that a lot of people went back from rural to urban areas. Why did all of them go back? I am also a migrant in a way in Delhi. I did not go back because I had a very secured income source at that point of time. At the background of this is where the project really comes from, because from rural to urban areas, there is a very regular distress migration happening on a very seasonal basis. So the objective was that how can we work on that to diversify the existing livelihood sources so that people don't have to migrate out of distress? And then in the long run, probably this leads to creation of a long-term rural resilience where people are becoming more resilient to future shocks. And in this context, of course, climatic shocks is very clear from the report what CEEW just launched and all the work that people like NIDM does, and also biological disasters, pandemics, whatever else we are talking about. So when we said, okay, let's alternate livelihoods, diversify livelihoods, create resilience, I think our focus was to also see what is resilience. Let's try and unpack this term because it's also one of the upcoming jargons, that's currently being used. And we can read in the media in terms of Stockholm Resilience Center or the Global Resilience Partnership actually coming and saying that, okay, resilience is not everything. It means something a bit more specific. So if I look at maybe some of the recent definitions, I think the one that we actually try and look at is in terms of resilience being the capacity of a system, be it an individual, a forest, a city, or an economy, to deal with change like climate change and continue to develop. And in these terms, I think through large programs like MHEWS and NRLM, what we are trying to also do is improve capacities on three lenses: the absorptive capacity, the adaptive capacity, and also the transformational capacities of people. And I think this then further contributes to also the climate change shock absorption that we are talking about. How does this become relevant in the larger framework of climate resilience and shock absorption that we are talking about? Any flood hits or any drought hits, we see that Government of India uses MHEWS as a very quick mechanism to reach out to the people. And that's where we can actually use that program to build more resilient infrastructure, create assets in a more scientific manner. One of our biggest contributions is GIZ so far has actually been looking at geographic information systems for community level planning exercise and bottom up planning in MHEWS. Now, the idea is we use as much as possible the open source data that is available from the National Remote Sensing Center, bring it to a ground level, local government, women's self-help group level, to actually use these maps and sit with them for a more informed decision making. In the process, I think two things have happened. One is the planning process has become more scientific. So instead of us saying, okay, the community is saying we want a farm pond here or a plantation here, this comes from a scientific lens of actually looking at a drainage line treatment, where is the ridge, where is the valley, and also bringing in their requirements on the same platform. So that kind of a sustainable natural resource creation has a huge impact on a climate resilient planning process or a disaster risk management planning process. On the other hand, where GIS was a rocket science and something that only scientists knew, now the community is able to own it up. So I think programs like MHEWS has done a lot with support of technical partners like us in kind of breaking this down to a ground level. They need not know everything to do with GIS, but the application of it. And I think that's where is the way ahead for the early warning systems. Just like how we saw Mandagini Ki Awaaz, the contribution of making it people-centric and community-driven is the only way ahead, I think, that we have. As much as we definitely need technology, I think without that, it is absolutely not possible. But the whole marriage of technology to the people-centric processes, to bringing the community participation, I think so far it's almost like crisis is the mother of invention. So we saw Kerala, which never expected to flood in 2018, and actually everybody coming together to create human-led stories. We recently had a huge movie on that. Post the disaster, we saw Kerala actually making local government level disaster management plans, bringing in the whole community participation. I think programs like rural development are where you have the whole community resource person structure at a ground, which has already a lot of cadres working as Krishi Sakhis and Udyog Sakhis and all kinds of Sakhis, right? Like literally every program has a community resource person. How can we already leverage such cadres and involve them in the preparedness process, in the planning process, when Sir talked about gender transformation, no, and that's where we, as a German government, we recently have a feminist development policy. In fact, to look at more gender transformative approaches, where we have networks like self-help groups, how to bring them to the forefront, and maybe pilot some of these even in the mitigation aspects of climate resilience. So let me hand it over back to you, Vaibhav.
Great, great. Thank you, Ms. Paul. I think the one point that you emphatically made, and I think Ms. Sonic also made that point, that the notion that the whole point of science being used in the planning process is absolutely important. With climate science, it has been very challenging actually, because the climate science is probably one of the ones it's developed very recently as compared to many other branches of sciences. So now moving from that scientific level, that kind of IPCC level of science, to the level where it is involved in now policy making, right? So science and policy interfaces is very clearly increasing, as Ms. Soning emphasized. We're not talking about using that scientific information in the planning process at the community level, right? So that is also another interface that is developing, which is very, very motivating and the great kind of development. I think you also emphasized one very interesting thing, which was earlier not covered. We talked about climatic systems. We talked about policy architecture, geospatial systems, and all that. You also emphasized the importance and criticality of economic systems. Till now, I mean, generally speaking, there's of course a lot of aspects that go into, but the whole point about migration, understanding that there is a reality, an economic backdrop. There's a lot of economic processes that are happening, within which we have to place all the intervention, be it at policy level or community level. So understanding of that economic systems, which is in itself a pretty complex system, right? We have to bring that understanding to ensure that the interventions are much more effective in nature, right? And you talked a lot about the community level development. On that front, I mean, I want to open it for Q&A, at least before coming to the next round. But Mr. Ratnu, I would like to come to you for one specific point. Ms. Paul talked about community level kind of intervention development. But we know that village level disaster management plans are also in the offing. Could you share some experience of the development of village level disaster management plans?
I think this has now become into mainstream of the Ministry of Panchayat Raj and Rural Development. But I'd like to tell you about my experience of making India's first village level disaster management plan when I was a young IS probationer. In backdrop of the Odisha cyclone and Bhuj earthquake, our batch got the training, and the disaster management module was first time introduced in the IS Academy. So when I went to the field, I just wanted to try out this thing, some pilot, and I worked with one village called Samyar in 2004 October. We involved everybody and we made the committees, and 15 days using all local resources. We have planned out some training program for volunteers, a different committee, So it was more of response oriented. Let me say that mitigation and those things were not inbuilt into, but I was just looking at a multi-hazard scenario of a cyclone, a person going from desert of Rajasthan Thar desert. I had my own limitation in understanding what is a cyclone and what is a sea surge. So sometimes there is a blessing in disguise, that lack of knowledge. So I kept it more broad based, and thumb rule we use that nothing will be used outside the village. All the resources from the village will be used, whether the transportation or anything. So different committees started working for 15 days. Rescue, the first aid, forewarning committee, shelter managed committee, and overall village level disaster management committee. Around 7 to 8 committees were formed. And we have done the mapping of all the resources and other thing. And it was a great experience of working with the fishermen community. And they thought that we know very well, but this fellow is a officer, our officer, who does so much for us. Let us listen to him. And they did it as a play way. And so the point I'm trying to thrive is that how this, has reaffirmed my faith that capacity building really works. And after tsunami, I started, working with the community, and I forgot about this thing. And then I was reminded by, a wife of our additional chief secretary and commissioner disaster management, whose wife was working in the Hindu paper, and she wanted to know about what has happened to that village. And she went and captured the data. And that is how I got to know that, the lives were saved. So when hundreds of people died in the villages, but the last mile capacity building, if everything fails, like ma'am was telling, that what about the rural areas if your technology fails? So I think the answer to that is that if your last mile community-based capacity building programs are vibrant, even if the early warning system fails, if the community is prepared and knows basics of saving their lives and assets, they will survive, they will resilient. So that is just I wanted to tell. And today I'm happy that based upon this experiment, I think UNDP had made that time entire their country program on the coastal area, etc. So
Great.
thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Ratnu, for this very interesting story that that across so much time, you invested in this particular capacity building the last mile so long back, and you are clearly seeing the results now, which is very motivating to listen to. And now it's great that this is being mainstreamed, right? The Ministry of Panchayati Raj is now thinking about doing similar interventions, which is, I think, which is a very positive step for the country. I have a bunch of questions, but I know the time is limited, so I would open it for the floor for any question and answer. Mics, please. And if you could introduce yourself, and then could you also, if you could also direct the question, if you have any particular panelists in mind or a general question.
Thanks, Vaibhav. Deepak Maheshwari from Ikria, and my question is to Ms. Sonek. So you had come, you had worked with the PHFI on this report on migration of children during distress. So how do you see that playing as a long-term impact with this type of early warning systems role in ensuring the sustainability and the prospects for the children in particular?
So that's a very interesting question you've asked. And I am very happy to share what we did with that project. So as Mika was mentioning, a lot of migration internally happens in India. In Maharashtra also, people migrate and they also move every day. They commute every day for livelihoods. But we are talking about rural migration that happens because there are certain pockets of the state where they are not able to harvest a Rabi crop. So after the Kharif harvesting is over, they move to neighboring states for working in some other place to earn their livelihood. So the elderly get left behind and the children move with the family. So this study we did as a multi-department study. So Women and Child, Labor, Education Department, Rural Development Department, Public Health, they were all involved in this study. And what we found was that there's a disruption of the services to these children because they are not registered at the receiving end. They come and go, everybody knows. But beyond that, there was no line listing of who's coming and how long they're staying. And they are totally at the mercy of the contractors who take them. So after this study, one of the major outcomes, which I'm happy to share, is that Maharashtra created a tracking system. It's called Maharashtra Migration Tracking System, MMTS. And this involves all our neighboring states. So the local authorities, that's usually the BDO, the Block Development Officer, fills in details of the families with their names, age, and their Aadhaar card details and puts it in the system. And at the receiving end, the Block Development Officer can see that these many women, children, and men are coming. Usually elderly people do not go. And then the disruption that had been happening over the years, that has been curtailed to a large extent since a year ago. In between, due to COVID, obviously, all this didn't work. And every year we are building our capacity. So looking at continuation of services for them, including education, vaccination, health coverage, all that has been achieved under the Maharashtra Migration Tracking System. This is one of the major outcomes. In addition to that, there has been an effort to sensitize them as to, there are other livelihood options within the state, and that because they've been just traditionally doing it. It's like, an annual activity that they undertake. So all of these things have helped us to deal with this community because they are very vulnerable. As Mika pointed out, these are the vulnerable people who move due to lack of livelihood for a couple of months every year. And there are no savings that can help them. So these things, I think, are helping rural communities understand that there are options. Most of the time, they don't know. I hope that answered your question.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Sonik. Any other question? Yeah, so you and then Tanushree, I'll come to you. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, good morning. My name is Ujjwal, and the part of the Mikha is there, so we are in the same team. So while focusing on the livelihood component, so I would like to learn more about some good examples of livelihood recovery anywhere. So community-led interventions, and even in Maharashtra, there are very strong institutions through MAVIM, and lots of examples are there. MAM is here. So any good examples for livelihood recovery, and we are also discussing about the migrants and migrant workers. So most vulnerable communities, post natural disaster, livelihood recovery examples. Thank you.
So livelihood recovery examples,
Yeah.
ma'am, you want to?
The question, because you mentioned Maharashtra, so I'm tempted to reply. So I can give you an example which has won the PM's award also. This is in the district of Sholapur, where, we had this Pardhi tribal community, which was engaged in a lot of this illicit liquor making. And there was high incidence of crime, and they were also people who were generally outcast in the community. Nobody wanted to engage with them. They were like at the periphery of, every village, wherever they were residing. So it was the initiative of the SP. In fact, it started from the police officer. And she, being a lady, she started engaging with them and tried to understand why they do this. And again, the issue came out that they were doing it to make money. And they knew very well what they were doing was wrong, but then that was something that was working for them, so they were doing it. So over a period of months, she with her team and involving civil society organizations to do counseling, she they wear these very beautiful outfits. I don't know if you've ever seen a Pardhi photograph. They wear this headgear and lovely, very colorful outfits. So she encouraged them first to get into making these handicrafts in a way that they could be marketed. But of course, that alone would not have sustained the entire community. So she helped them to get things like, licenses to run a fair price shop, or, imagine, from being in an outcast community, she tried to mainstream them. It took time and effort, but she also helped them to open a tea shop, like getting a license from the local municipal council to be able to do that. And at the same time, tried to put the children in the school and created women SHGs, which could, apply for microcredit. And all of these efforts led to the majority of this community leaving this, business of illicit liquor making and getting mainstreamed. And this recently, in this year, 2023, won her the Prime Minister's Award. So there are always options, but I can tell you one thing, it's a lot of hard work. It doesn't happen overnight. There are no bits of it that you can really scale up. We are always in India, we talk about let's scale up, but some things will work in a certain area, they may not work in another area. And always there are a few key people who are very much a part of this complex way of bringing about the change. But today it's a successful experiment and has worked well.
Thank you, Ms. Soni. Please go ahead, Mr.
Just wanted to add some of the experiences from Tamil Nadu. Post tsunami, I was given the responsibility of entire state's coastal rural areas, both infrastructure and livelihood. So during that time, we leveraged on the existing self-help groups, and there was also differential impact on the communities. Fishermen had directly affected because they had boats and other thing, and they had more tangible assets. But there were many Dalits and other communities which live in the fringes of fishermen village, which are actually workers who work with the fishermen. But since their assets they did not have, but their livelihood was affected. So we leveraged on the strong self-help group movement which is there in Tamil Nadu, and we used microcredit as a strategy to bring resilience into this community, and that was very effective because we infused revolving funds and those kind of amount into the entire group or the federation, so they could borrow, and that had given them because many times we think that the family will require this asset, and many times we are proved wrong. So I think it is the credit to which families know their divergence of needs during those crises. So that experience of Tamil Nadu was more on microcredit infusion into this thing. And along with the fisherman boats and other thing, livelihood restoration programs with the NGO and other things were there. But this was very good success story of resilience.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Rattu, for sharing that. Credit is extremely important, and the finance credit is extremely important. So, I mean, thank you for bringing up that point, especially this whole network of self-help groups that many governments and NGOs are leveraging across states. And microcredit has been one of the big interventions in that, and using it for livelihood, especially, let's say, post-disaster recovery, and using that network is a very interesting innovation, institutional innovations, which is great. Tanushree, your question, and then, sir, I'll come to you.
Hello, everyone. Very insightful discussion. I'm Tanushree Ganguly, and I lead the Clean Air program at CEEW. So, application of early warning system for a slightly different risk, air pollution. And my question is for Mr. Rattu. I've seen some work produced on air pollution and public health emergencies by NIDM. So my question is that where do you see the risks and opportunities in extending early warning system to air quality management, especially given the uncertainties associated with air quality forecasts, and also the immense potential of actually being able to mitigate predicted air quality levels by taking preemptive measures? So your response to that.
Thank you for a very interesting question. I think there's a lot of need to work in this area. Let me admit that NIDM has not given much thought on air quality and real time, but I really appreciate this, unsettling my mind with your question, and surely this will give me thought, and we'll also like to engage with CEEW that how we can have. One thing is that we have to, first thing is to understand and assess the risk. For that, we are finding that many places there are real-time network of this thing there. How we can further strengthen this network based upon our assumption that certain areas may be highly prone to air pollution. So we need to first have mechanisms which is spread across the countries. Those areas where there are more hazard of air pollution, we have to have the real-time data. We need to then build upon dissemination of this risk to the appropriate people, and also the response and mitigation strategies, so that how the impact can be minimized. I think a lot of work need to be done in an interdisciplinary manner with breaking silos, and many departments and agencies have to come together.
Yes, Mr.
So I've done a little bit work on air quality, so I'll be happy to share what has been my understanding. So you mentioned about the risks and advantages, right? So the risks primarily are that you need to have very good quality data, first of all, to be able to pass out information to the public. And so, you have to work very closely with the IMD and IITM. And the major role to be played in this is by the local authority. So the local authority not only needs to be sensitized, but should be able to handle that kind of data and put it out. Another risk is that, usually the pollutants or the pollutant causing industry or areas or pockets are within those limits. And so it can very easily become a political question. So if you go out and say, well, in this ward, this is causing the problem, then you are going to have a nice fisticuff fight over there. So you need a certain level of understanding also of the citizens to appreciate what is it that they are being told. So if you start talking about in what particular matter, what ppm of pollution is happening, the appreciation has to be there. So, and the pollutants are usually in these underdeveloped, low income pockets. And, and if there's an effort to rehabilitate them in some way, it can always boomerang. So there are sensitivities connected to this, whether it is, with regard to the local elections or the district level or body or elections or the state elections. So that's one important part of it. The advantages are that it has a direct impact on reducing public health, impact. And if people are over a period of time, if they can appreciate that this information is for their own good, you can improve your overall health indicators in that particular area. And over time, even many of these non-communicable diseases which respiratory diseases and even cancer causing diseases can see a decline if there is better appreciation of this data. But suffer for that matter is not there for every city. So we have to not only invest more in creating better, data gathering mechanisms which can feed into citizens' better appreciation. And there's also something called citizen science, where the citizens are also able to appreciate what is it that is going on around them. So we are on track, but it'll take us some more time to get there, as Mr. Ratnu said.
Thank you, Ms. Sonik. We're already beyond time, so just last question, then we can discuss over lunch and all, because Mr. Ratnu also has to leave for another engagement. Please, sir, if you could go with your question.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brigadier P.K. Singh. I'm a senior consultant with the UP SDMA. It's a question and answer session, but I'm not very sure if I'm asking a question or trying to give a suggestion. Pardon me. This is about, since the theme of today's workshop is the early warning system, and I take a cue from what the Dr. Mahapatra said in the morning. He laid a lot of emphasis on early warning on lightning. This is the one area I think we are suffering the maximum casualties, loss of lives, loss of animals, not much of loss of property, but definitely in my state, UP is leading in the lightning casualties. And so is the state with the Bihar, Jharkhand, and a lot of other states. He also talked about the schemes which are presently running. One is the Damini app and the MHEWS. Unfortunately, sir, it's a wonderful initiative taken by the government in the IMD. But the fact is the Damini gives you an area of 20 kilometers radius, and the strike is a pinpoint strike, the lightning strike. One can imagine in an area of 20 square kilometers, 20 kilometer radius is a much larger area. It's there is a saying that the bhediya aaya, bhediya aata nahi hai, and it's a credibility of the system is losing today. We have taken some initiatives in the state, wherein we have honed on to certain agencies which are claiming that they would give a much shorter area warning. For example, they give you a 3 kilometer radius, which is fairly successful in the state and with quite satisfactory results. It's a one block of the Sonbhadra district, wherein we had a lot of casualties, but till now, this year, there has not been any casualties, and there have been lightning strikes in that area. Now the government, state government is very, quite happy with the initiative, and they are expanding it to some other districts. We are going in for the phase 2 of it. We interacted with the state IMD, and we were told the IMD claims, and I'm sure it is for good reasons, and they have it's a well-validated proclamation, that there are agencies worldwide which are giving a radius of 150 meters, not kilometers, 150 meters, some European companies. My request or suggestion to the people, the eminent personalities here, can we make it a top-down approach, take those agencies on board, because the maximum casualties are the lightning today. We are told that one is a Finland.
Sorry, sir, could you conclude also?
Yeah, it's just a suggestion to the people. Yes. If they can be taken on board, because this will do a lot of good for the societies. One other question, a very small question, which is we keep talking about the command control. Today the climate change is in fact dictating the disasters and DRR projects and all. We have two ministries at the center, which is one is the climate change, one is the Home Ministry, which is looking at the disaster management. Is it a time that so many ministries have come up in last 2 decades? Is it time for to have a disaster management ministry? Request to the NIDM executive director, can this be taken up with the government, or at least some kind of a proposal to the government to have one ministry?
No, there is no. Ministry of Home
But
disaster management is part of the Ministry of Home.
Ministry of the Environment, Forest and Climate Change is the ministry which looks after the climate change. Like in our state, the state action plan on climate change is being emanated from a different ministry. Revenue looks after the disaster management. Though I agree at the district level, some of the state level, some of the states have, the departments They have created it like Bihar has one.
Well, if I can come, I think, while the subject has to be looked after by one ministry, and there are two responses to your question. One is that the experience of those states which have made a separate vertical other than additional chief secretary or commissioner revenue administration who is coordinating with collectors, and they have experimented to have a separate vertical. We have found that they become very redundant during disaster and they are not able to effectively give a response. So there was a well thought out reason why disaster management was kept in home affairs, and I think it should continue. There is, to my mind, we can do the further deliberation. So from that perspective, I feel. Second thing is, at this juncture, we are thinking about mainstreaming DRR into each vertical, and therefore it will give a conflicting signals, as if we are thinking that one ministry can assume the entire role. So I think each vertical of governance has to imbibe the DRR framework into it. And as far as the separation is concerned, NDMA has a relative autonomy headed by Prime Minister, and which works independently as a vertical on DRR dedicated with an IDM.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Ratna, and thank you, Ms. Sonic. And thank you for this very important point about lightning. Of course, we are increasingly realizing, that's why Dr. Mohapatra also very clearly mentioned this, that this is a new disaster which we never thought about earlier, but there are increasingly instances of lightning strikes now, which claim lives, and we are improving every year with our better understanding of forecasting lightning also. So I know there are a lot of questions, but we are already delayed now. Mr. Ratna also has to leave. This was an excellent discussion. We can continue this over lunch. We have still some time. The panelists will be here. So I would like to conclude this panel. Thank you again for your time. Thank you for this excellent points that have been made. Can I request the CEEW team to come over for just a quick photograph with the panelists? If you could come very soon, and then I'll move to the vote of thanks by Dr. Arnab Ghosh. Great. Thank you so much for all the panelists. With this, I request Dr. Arnab Ghosh, founder CEO of CEEW, for his comments, for his thank you note. Okay, please.
Mr. Ratnu, before you, I know we've already taken up a lot of your time, and Ms. Sonic, thank you so much for battling natural and man-made disasters, for making it here. You know, the topic of today was how can technology strengthen India's disaster preparedness. But the etymology of technology is techne plus logia, and techne is the art and craft, whereas logia is the systematic treatment. So technology is not just a machine or an app or a data, it's actually the art and craft in how we leverage the logia part of technology. So if I could just, as I was listening through this incredible set of comments, including well, let me just say the best thing that came out of Dr. Mohapatra's in-person presence not being here is that now we have a training module in the form of his lecture that he delivered. I think that was an outstanding exposition of as Zed said, the 30 years of his experience. But I take away 5 messages: forecasting, broadcasting, coordinating, investing, and learning. I think when we talk about forecasting, as Dr. Mohapatra said, increasingly it's about nowcasting, right? How do you get the real-time information? But also, as he, towards the end of his lecture, said that, it's also about how do you build the capacity of institutions beyond and leverage the role of institutions outside of government to be able to do that. But then comes broadcasting. I think Ms. Sonic's point about we need information, not sensation, right? And so how do you broadcast in a manner that works? So the Logia part of this is, and I was discussing this with Dr. Rajshekhar, right? For instance, CDRI has telecoms as one of the key pillars of its work, because telecoms is a foundational infrastructure. It does not matter if everyone has a phone. If the cell phone towers themselves break down during a disaster, then you've not been able to relay the information. So that's the physical infrastructure. But then, as the film that we showed, Mandakini Ki Awaaz, the social capital of trusted local voices becomes the techne part of the broadcasting role. Then comes, of course, coordinating. And of course, the example again from Mumbai, the integrated command and control. But beyond Mumbai, the work you outlined of coordinating across different administrative departments, as well as what Mr. Ratnu said about coordinating with training institutions, etc. And then we come to investing. And we did not talk about this much. Of course, Mr. Ratnu raised it in his comments and we discussed it offline. But I think we've got to make an economic case of investing in disaster preparedness and resilience, not just the avoided losses, but how do we attract investment by saying that we have a vulnerable district and we have now made it more resilient. So please come and set up your factory there. Right? Rather than saying we have a vulnerable district, or rather than saying we don't have any vulnerability at all. Hiding the head in the sand is not the way to attract investment. And so your role in designing Gati Shakti itself will go a long way towards integrating disaster preparedness into that infrastructure planning. And then comes learning. And I think this is the role, again, Ms. Sonic and what Ms. Paul said about, how do you leverage the existing networks that are on the ground already, especially in rural or peri-urban areas. And I agree, Ms. Sonic, it's not about scale, but it's about the speed of learning. How quickly can we learn from a case study and glean the insights from that and then reapply that in a different context? But having said this, forecasting, broadcasting, coordinating, investing, and learning, I do believe there is a 6th lesson, which is listening. And which is why at CEEW, we prepared these 16 films on climate resilience to listen to how communities have not only encountered the rising climate risk, but leveraged their minimal resources, but their maximal social capital to become far more resilient. And I am glad to say that that series of 16 films won a documentary award in the United States just a few months ago. But it's not about the films, it's actually about the communities showcased in those films. And we can keep listening to these communities, then we'll constantly have the techne part to add to our logia. Thank you so much for joining us today.
So thank you, everyone. We'll break for lunch now, and we also have postcards available, which have the key findings of the report, which you can pick up and take with you. And yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and hope you have a great lunch and had a great session. Thank you.